Okay, just some quick important things that you'll need in order to do this project. This is a backing plate from a PT Cruiser with rear discs, and of course it has the e-brake. It has the drum and hat e-brake. So the nice thing is the Shelby charger e-brake cable will still work in this thing. The other thing that you'll need is obviously the e-brake pads. I have the rotor. This is actually a rotor for an SRT4. I got SRT4 neon soft brake lines just to replace it, have everything work. The most important things that you'll need for this conversion is the spindle. So this is the PT Cruiser spindle. The SRT4s don't have this style spindle on the rear. It's a different suspension and just rear axle setup. This is the spindle from the factory 83 Shelby Charger. As you can see, they are almost the same. The Chargers is actually, the width is a little bit different, and the holes will almost bolt up. And when I say almost, they get close, but not quite. And that's what's part of the modification that we'll need to do here. Basically, what we're doing, well, I guess the stupid sensor's in the way. But in other words, what we're going to have to do is there's two holes on the PT Cruiser spindle, which we're just going to have to elongate just a little bit, and it'll be able to work and bolt into the Shelby Charger, which is why then you'll be able to get and use the backing plate for that. The other important thing is get the right hardware kit for the rear drum e-brake. It's the one with one long spring and one short spring. Places like Rock Auto, they will sometimes, like happened to me, send me the hardware kit for the rear drum PT Cruiser setup, which was incorrect, so I had to order another set. And the other most important part, which kind of burned me, is getting this bracket. Now, the e-brake cable actually attaches right here to this bracket, and it's actually what helps push the drum pads away when you're e-brake, and as you'll see later, it actually goes into here like so, fully assembled. So just make sure you get this piece. It's easy to find at a junkyard, which I will link a good North Carolina junkyard that will ship items like this to you. But if you try to find it new, it's unobtainium. You can't. So that's the big thing. The other mentionable is try to get this spindle from the junkyard as well. You can still buy them brand new, but because they are hardened steel, they're $80 a piece, and I am cheap. And $80 a piece, it's $160 and just a spindle dick. So I went to the junkyard, or actually called up that North Carolina junkyard, and they're able to mail me two of these bad boys for a really good price, a lot cheaper than one brand new. The last thing I have here is this is a caliper from an SRT4, the wrecked one I bought to do the full SRT conversion on my 83 Shelby Charger. So obviously it needs to be cleaned up and all that good stuff, but that will come in time. So with that, we'll get to work. Another big modification besides wallowing out the two holes there is we're going to actually have to modify this backing plate right here, do a couple cuts, which I'll show you in the video too. I just want to do another quick mention. I will be using SRT4 or Neon interchangeably. I know there's a lot of people that might get butthurt saying an SRT4 is not a Neon and vice versa, and I just don't have time for that. That almost grinds my gears as much as those damn Firebird owners who get all butthurt when someone calls their Firebird a Camaro. So, yeah, anyway, we're going to go ahead and do this. I do have a two-post lift in my garage. But you can just do this in your driveway. You don't need to get the car that far off the ground. It just helps, and my garage is tight, so we're not even working completely up in the air today. So here we go. So I'm removing the bearing, the drum, and the drum shoes, and also removing the cable. It's a good idea to spray everything down, brake clean, just in case there's asbestos with a 40-year-old car, and just removing all the parts. you can do these with hand tools, but it just takes a while because from the factory there's Loctite and it sucks. So if you have an impact, use the impact. Yeah. You also notice I haven't taken off the e-brake cable yet because I remembered from the other side it's a pain in the ass in general. I know there's a special tool for this. I don't have it, but it was easier for me to actually have the backing plate off so I can get to all three prongs to pull it out, because there's three prongs. You have to hold it at the same time in order to pull it out. So I kind of hammered on the socket a little bit. There's just so much buildup on the bolt. And sometimes with all the grease and everything, you gotta just put that 40 years of buildup through it. So now the whole backing plate and the spindle dick should come off. Alright, spindle off. Backing plate. Oh, brake line in the back. I'll go ahead and take it off now. Alright, so you can see here the whole brake assembly and hub are off. They're all down here, all fat, dumb, and happy. I'll go ahead and grab the spindle and show how we're going to have to wall out the holes. Also, I know I was using a chrome socket to take out these bolts. I needed something thin wall, is the only thing that was going to fit in there. But again, you can do it by hand. Just make sure you have a big ass ratchet or a breaker bar, because it will not be easy, especially after 40 years of buildup. Alright, got the new spindle dick. I hope spindle dick catches on as a technical term for these things, but I'll go ahead and show how these will line up. Alright, so here is the PT spindle dick on the basically spindle dick backing plate thing from the factory 83 Charger. As you can see, these two top holes, they will work and line up just fine. Obviously, the spindle dick holes are a little bit bigger than the bolt holes, which is just like the factory one too. The factory bolt holes, just so everyone can see, I'm not trying to be stupid unsafe, they're larger than the original holes. So what basically comes down to, if you're worried about this moving around or whatever, and say, hey, wallowing out the holes isn't that good of an idea, it's going to be fine as long as you torque all these bolts to spec, basically German, good and tight. So what I wanted to show here is the top holes are fine, and then the bottom holes, so if we get these as close as we can, mother, father, alright, bottom holes need to come in and up just a little bit to elongate them. And then the kind of cool thing is, because we're doing that, it's going to make that clearance so much tighter. So for those of you, again, who are worried about the motion of this, let's say if those bolts weren't tight enough, basically the whole spindle dick is going to be sitting nice and tight, because there won't be nearly as much play because the amount of wallowing we're going to have to do at the bottom here. So I'll go ahead and grab the grinding bit. I've also used a file just to clean up edges and stuff. So a file is nice. I'll get a grinding bit. I just attach it to my drill, and we'll grind away. So a good buddy of mine got me these cutting bits, double cut carbide rotary bits. I just put them on my drill, and it's no technical way, just guess and check. Basically do a little bit, come back, test fit it, and back and forth until it fits. So I'll go ahead and put that on my drill, and we'll get to getting after it.
So basically right here what I'm doing is using the bit to open up the holes and elongate them a little bit, and I'm constantly checking against the mount to make sure it fits fine. Start on one hole, and once that's done, go ahead and do the other, and then as a final guess test fit, what I do is I take the bolts and I thread them in, and I make sure there's enough clearance for all 4 of them.
All right, so the holes are nice and elongated now. Just gotta clean everything up, make sure there's no metal shavings. So the spindle dick is done. It'll bolt up. The last kind of big modification, and it's not even that difficult, is modifying the backing plate. Now, if you're going to use this backing plate, the only way it'll work with the factory L-body backing spindle dick mount, right, is you got to take off this wheel speed sensor from the SRT4 Neon or PT Cruiser, because this is a PT Cruiser backing plate. Again, the SRT4 one is probably the same. They're all pretty similar. But this is just what I'm using, so I don't get any hate mail later saying, oh, I used the SRT4 backing plate and it didn't work, because frankly, we made PT Cruisers for a lot longer of a time period, so typically it's easier to find them in the junkyard. And again, the Neon dead rear axle housing, or at least the SRT4 one, is a different setup. It doesn't really have a dead axle. It's kind of like a independent rear thing going on. So I went ahead, knocked out the speed sensor. You know what we do with that? Shit can it. All right, that's gone. So, not only do we have to modify it, but the question is always like where, right? So, luckily, these holes in this backing plate, they pretty much will line up. I might have to grind a little bit, but I think these holes are even a little bit bigger, so we get a little bit more wiggle room. But here's where the issue lies. Basically, this housing back here, the e-brake cable, which you see right here, or on the PT Cruiser, same difference, is going to come into here, and that's where it mounts. And then the cable will then come through to here, to that little bracket. The housing here hits the dead axle of the L body. Now, you can look at this 2 ways. You can say, okay, well, I'll just cut off some of the dead axle at the top here, which you definitely could do. But, you know, this plate is welded here and it's boxed in. And I didn't want to ruin any of the structural integrity of the wheel if there was some weird strain or stressor going sideways. So I wanted to take and keep this really high quality 80s Chrysler dead rear axle strength is as strong as I could. So I rather modify a backing plate than modify a dead axle and potentially weaken the rear dead axle. Now, and because I already did it on the other side, we're going to keep this mount and everything. Basically, what I'm going to do, and I'll show you outside, is I'm going to cut a line here, and then down here, and then another line here. So it's going to just take a chunk out of this piece, but it's really not that big of a deal. The e-brake can still mount in there, and the wire can still move freely to actuate the parking brake. And then the only, I guess, downside is you may, if you drive around in the rain, get water in there, but I'll tell you, centrifugal force of brakes and wheels, the water's going to splash out anyway. It's not going to do anything bad. You know, pickup trucks every day go on boat ramps and completely immerse their rear ends and their drum brake setups, and they still work fine. And I'm not planning on driving through a flood zone in a 1983 Shelby Charger, which I've torn apart. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this. You could, if you're doing it at home, really take your time and just cut little pieces at a time and make sure that there's not a really big opening if you're really worried about water intrusion. But ain't nobody got time for that. I got a kid, I got to work. I'm just going to cut it and send it, and it'll work perfectly okay, and make sure everything's greased up and good to go. So we'll go ahead and get the grinder with the cutting wheel out. We'll cut that piece out. So then this can sit flush, because right now it can't sit flush because this part is hitting the housing. And let's see if I can get, so see how it's like, no, I can't get in there. Well, it's gonna get in there, and even though it looks like a lot, once it's cut, it's gonna go right in, just like with the other side I have set up. Alright, the cut's now done. I hit it with some paint, and time to go put it on the car. Alright, so spindle, there goes in the backing plate like that, and then we're gonna go ahead and bolt it to the L-body dead axle. I'm gonna start everything by hand, and then tighten everything down slowly. So here we go. Okay, so I also, how I thought I did before, had to elongate the 2 bottom holes in the backing plate. So now we should be able to go together. Throw the spindle dick in behind the backing plate. I'll start all the bolts by hand, just to make sure they're threaded okay, and then drive them down. So hopefully there's no issues. Alright, so you can see that the e-brake cable is through the housing, and it's automatically clips itself once you push it through. Now with the e-brake here, the next important step is, let me grab the bracket. We're going to have to slide the spring back that's wrapping around the e-brake cable, because it's a coiled spring, but you can actually push it back and then thread it through here, so the head of the e-brake cable will be resting right here. The easiest way I found to do it without driving myself insane, even though I'll drive myself insane doing this anyway, is I got some locking pliers here. What I'll do is I'll push the spring back a little bit, enough so I can get the locking pliers between the head of the cable and the springs, and then I'll push it back and then clamp and lock them onto the cable to hold the spring back, so I can thread the cable head through that bracket. So I'll go ahead and do that now. Alright, I finally got the bracket on there, so it's on. Shoes go next. This will sit in here like that, and we'll put the shoes on next. So here we go. Alright, through the power of the internet, you can see the drum brake assembly is now on. A couple important things to note. I've seen, as much as I've researched, this spring does go behind. It doesn't go in front. There's a couple videos out there I've seen people doing this job and they put the spring in front. I don't know if it'll actually make any difference, but that's the way it came from the factory for a Neon or a PT Loser. So that make sure everything's in good. Springs are good. Up next, we're gonna go with putting on the discs, but also adjusting the brake shoes with the adjuster. I like to get them snug so they just barely drag, because I want a good e-brake. And then obviously when you lift the e-brake up, it will stop the car really well. And you know, if it drags a little bit, it's fine. It will burn off. And that's how we set them up at the dealership. So that's how I'm going to set it up today. All right, so there's a little pro tip here. I went ahead and took the nut back off, only because it's kind of tight in there and it sucks having to adjust, especially brand new parking brake shoes. So what I've been doing is tightening up the shoes with the adjuster. And then don't have to put the nut back on, but you can just slide the hub on. The rotor. There's a little bit of drag there. I'm going to go ahead and put the e-brake on, see if it stops me from spinning it. Alright, e-brake's on, won't spin. Let's say that's adjusted up, which is good. I'm going to go ahead and just disconnect the e-brake. So e-brake shoes are adjusted on both sides now, good and tight. So a couple clicks up, and it stops the wheel from spinning completely. So here we go. Yeah. There's a little bit of drag. The drag will wear off as the car drives. It only takes a few miles down the road. It'll burn, which is fine. So let's go ahead and put the nut on. Good and tight. All right, dust cap on. Another good, easy tip is to get the dust cap off. Just use some channel locks, and then you just put it on each side, like that, and you basically just wiggle and it'll start working its way out instead of trying to beat on it. Makes things a little bit easier. All right, next step is the caliper. All right, so the caliper's on. Hopefully lubed up the slides if you're doing this at home. All you gotta do is put the caliper bolts on. Good. Here and here. And we'll go ahead and tighten these by hand. Again, I didn't paint them red. They came off the wrecked SRT4 Neon. I used as my donor car. Apparently the guy liked to paint his calipers with the pads still on them. And yeah. But hey, they work for the application now. Boom. Tight. tight. All right, so the last part of this is the soft line, the brake line. It'll attach to the back of the caliper. The soft line kit did come with new brass or copper washers here and here. So the copper washer, if you don't know, goes on each side of this banjo fitting bolt, this side of the line, which will attach to the caliper. So one on one side, one on the other, and the bolt will go through. And you'll see the bolt is hollow, and that's how fluid gets through it. I'm not going to bore you with putting on this line, but I'll go ahead and show how the other side was done and where the attachment point is and where you can get rid of the old line for everything to work. So here we go. All right, so here's the two old brake lines I took off the Shelby. They used to be connected to this line here, which runs all the way to the front of the car. So the nice thing is you can take the soft line, see there's the banjo bolt there, and you can run it. I still haven't secured it. It's on my to-do list. I'm going to secure this to the body of the car. But basically make sure it's out of the way of the wheel and tire and suspension. I'm going to still have a little bit of work to just route this a little bit better and neater. But it will go ahead and it'll actually feed right into the factory Shelby line, which is pretty easy. And then, you know, the Neon had the bracket tree to it, so I'll find a good place to kind of arrange it and secure it. Here's what the factory stuff looks like. So obviously we haven't done this side yet. Roll it. Look at that beautiful bean footage. That's some good work. Anyway, this is the line we're going to be getting rid of. The same kind that's on the floor, except this is the passenger side. So we can go ahead and take off. Oh, we can do landscape mode. We can go ahead and take off all this, including the soft line, which goes up to here, and then our new SRT4 Neon line will actually connect right here to that same place. So that's how you'll finish up the four-wheel disc conversion. I just reminded myself I need to put the little dust boot cap back, so I'll do that now. And that about wraps it up. So the bottom line is, when it's all said and done, here's the 5x100 wheel that you could put on it. You can also put SRT4 wheels or anything like that, but you also have full 4-disc brakes and a working e-brake. The most important thing about all this is once you do the spindle dick mod, then you're basically free to upgrade the brakes however you see fit without having to find parts in the junkyard. You can order stuff that's readily available. You can even do drum brakes from a PT Cruiser if that's what you have in the yard, but at least you'll have hubs that you can attain to do it. It's really not that hard of a job. It's just time. And you can use basic tools. I know I have an air tool setup, but electric impacts work, or just, breaker bars, that sort of thing. Just take your time, and a grinder is pretty easy to get. If you don't have one already, use it all the time. So make an excuse to go get one. A little bit more about the car I'm kind of working on. I made homemade coilovers for it. Still need to do fender flares, so yes, the wheel is kind of out a little bit right now, but once the fender flares are on, it'll be good. I did have a whole donor SRT4 that was wrecked that I swapped completely into this car, including the entire body and engine wiring harness. This actually has an OBD2 plug. I'm running HP tuners right now, And if you plug it in, it thinks it's a neon. So it's pretty cool. It's got a 6262 big turbo on it. So, it's pretty serious. It's been a work in progress forever, but I'm trying to finish it up by the end of this year. So that's it. I hope this helps a lot for people who are doing 5-lug conversions. With these cars, especially L bodies, a lot more difficult to find the 5-lug hubs from L bodies that will work, and things like this are drying up in the junkyard. So this is a good, easy, practical way to do it. There's a million PT losers in a junkyard, so you'll be able to get things off of that, and then source what you can new, just to have peace of mind and everything's clean and easy. So the hydraulics aren't bad for the brakes at all. Once I figured that out, it's pretty easy to tie in. This should work on an Omni as well, GLHS, Plymouth Horizon, Scamps, all that good stuff. All right, thanks. Bye.